Hello, hello. Hope somebody can hear me anyway. I'm very sorry. We had a bit of a technical issue there. So if you are still there. Ah yes, somebody's come back anyway. Thank you for that. So yes, unfortunate technical issue with the Wi-Fi. Perhaps it's because I was talking about the ghosts. They don't always like that. So we'll blame it on them, shall we, and carry on if we can, whilst we can. I'm going to take a little bit of a stroll this way, heading away from the dungeons for a bit. Hopefully the Wi-Fi is better over this way in York. Hopefully we can continue anyway. So yes, what was I saying? Of course, about the ghost of the little boy, which I did have a brief encounter with there. I swear I felt a presence down there, as though somebody was watching me, and I did feel a very eerie presence. So if you do go into the dungeons and you happen to get the chance, if you're at the back of the group, you know, you might have a little encounter. Certainly various paranormal groups have visited and done paranormal investigations in the dungeons. So if you do get the chance to go on one of those, Paranormal Research York do quite a few events like that. So just heading round past St Mary's Church here, which I'll see in just a minute. It's a beautiful old church. Parts of it go back, well, to the 1200s. Has the tallest spire in York, believe it or not. If that's the sort of thing you aspire to. Yeah, sorry, the joke's terrible. I will stop, I do apologise. That's one of the torture elements that I didn't talk about. Telling bad jokes has been used many times. Anyway, here we are, we're in an area near the Jorvik Viking Centre. Jorvik, of course, being the Viking name for York. They came over here 866, the Great Heathen Army, so they were called, led by Ivar the Boneless. He wasn't really boneless, obviously, that was more of a nickname. Wouldn't have been much use in an invasion if you're just flopping around on the floor. But anyway, Ivar and his brothers came over here. Why did they come? Well, they'd raided England a few times, of course. You know, a bit of plunder, a bit of pillaging, and a bit of RAAPE. But they'd always gone home again. We'd really annoyed them this time, though. One of the Saxon kings, Aella, had killed Ragnar, the Viking king. If you've seen programs like Vikings on Netflix, you'll know who I'm talking about. Ragnar Lothbrok, great Viking king. Well, we killed him, and his sons were a bit miffed by that. They didn't take too kindly to us getting rid of dear old dad. So they came over here, a massive army of them, and we didn't really stand much chance, to be honest. They were great warriors, the Vikings, and they took over. And what they did to King Aella was known as the Blood Eagle, a very feared, very gruesome method of execution. Basically, they got him over a barrel, and then they cut down his back whilst he was still alive, opened him up and pulled his lungs, still alive of course, so they're still beating, out of his back, and laid them there like the wings of an eagle. And so they'd go up and down a bit like the flapping wings. Yeah, it's not the nicest of ways to go, is it really, to be honest? Yes, but this is what happened to poor Aella. Of course, this became known as Jorvik, pronounced with a Y, spelt with a J, the Viking capital of the north for quite a long time. And if you go into the Jorvik Centre when it's reopened, you can actually see a Viking settlement recreated in loving detail, including the smells, which, you know, you better prepare yourself if you go down there. Bit of a COVID test, let's put it that way. If you can't smell that, then there's definitely something wrong with you. And you see how day-to-day Viking life was. They weren't all just vicious killers, of course, you know, many other trades and crafts and things going on. But when they were digging here to build the shopping centre, which you can see around me, well, that is when some strange things started to happen. As though by digging up the past, they'd literally dug something up, disturbed some kind of presence, because the various shops around here started to report odd occurrences. There used to be a sweet shop here called Craven's, and various things would happen. You know, lights would come on when there was nobody there, the alarms would ring, objects would move when people weren't looking, stock would be thrown off the shelves, and this sort of thing, that it's quietened down a bit, is still reported in this area, particularly around the body shop. Perhaps ironic, given all the bodies around here, but basically the body shop does report unusual occurrences here. So again, in York, possibly why we have so many ghost sightings and experiences, people do tend to dig something up. You can't move around York without walking over somebody's grave somewhere. In fact, they estimate there's about 500,000 skeletons buried underneath the city centre alone here in York. Of course, you also do find other things, perhaps, you know, not so pleasant as well. They found near Lloyd's Bank, just up the road from here, what's called a coprolite. Now, if you don't know the word, well, it's, well, no better way of saying it than what it is. It's a fossilised poo. It's called the Lloyd's Bank coprolite, of course, and it's on display inside the Jorvik Viking Centre down there, and it's about 9 inches long. So you, yeah, probably a bit uncomfortable for whoever left that behind, but anyway, 9 inches of fossilised poo. And back in the day, when this first opened back in the 80s, you could actually handle some of the exhibits if you were here on a school trip, and somebody picked up said fossilised poo, and then when they were told what it was, went "Ugh!" and dropped it, and it broke into several pieces. And somebody, probably with a degree, I like to think, had to spend a few hours of their time painstakingly gluing this fossilised Viking poo back together. Imagine going home and your wife says, "What have you been doing today, darling?" And you go, "Oh, you don't want to know." That's kind of, I imagine, how they would have reacted to that. Now, talking of poo and unpleasant matters of the toilet, I suppose that might lead me on to the next bit I'm going to do before I finish. You see, toilet arrangements in York were more primitive, shall we say, than they are now. There are perhaps a shortage of public toilets these days. Who knows if you're watching from York City Council, but that's by the by. But back in the day, you know, people basically did what they did where they could for a long amount of time. Lots of things were thrown out into the street and basically just left there for a while. If you had a privy, well, you know, it'd all be left to fester in a big hole until the night soil men, which is not the best job, the night soil men, as they were called, would come along and cart away your leavings, so we say. There we go. Now, it's not, of course, just the living human inhabitants of York that left something behind. York, being very busy, of course, had lots of animals here, lots of horses. And horses, if anyone's ever had a horse, will know, as you know, they produce quite a lot of manure. You know, quite a lot. Some up to 35 pounds of manure a day. And imagine all the hundreds of horses coming here, horses pulling carts and carriages, you know, all going here and there and everywhere. Imagine how it all would start to mount up In fact, there was a massive problem trying to get rid of it all at one stage. Thankfully it's not like that now, but imagine walking past big steaming piles of it. Very good for the roses though, if you've got an allotment. But yes, York would have been not the most fragrant of places to walk around back in those days. But you want to get back onto executions. I know, I mean, poo and all that stuff, it's all entertaining perhaps, but you know, if I can get away with getting across this road, well, let's head on to the next bit and then I'll head off. Incidentally though, I don't know if you can see down here how high the river's getting here in York. A lot of flooding going on. We do get that a lot in York, but sometimes it has been known in 2015 to get as high as the road I'm on right now, near enough, flooding places like the dungeons and other attractions, like the Jorvik Centre as well, where we were just there. So that's how bad it can get in York. Anyway, just round the corner, going round the bend. I've gone round the bend a few times already though, so you can probably tell. We're heading down to Ouse Bridge, which, as the name suggests, crosses the River Ouse. So that's quite handy. Doesn't need too much explanation. The word ooze is the old word for water, or clear water. So basically just called it the River Water, which isn't very imaginative, of course. Not the best at naming things, but we like to say it like it is here in Yorkshire. However, calling it ooze clear water is, you could get sued under the Trade Descriptions Act, really, couldn't you? Because basically it's not very clear even nowadays. Back in the day though, it would have been even worse, with raw sewage all around it there. Just looking down at the King's Arms pub there, you can see another view, better view of how high it is at the moment, just up to the top of that fence. And this tends to happen quite a lot in York, every few years or so. Happened earlier this year too. So anyway, here we are on Ouse Bridge. This isn't the original Ouse Bridge. We've had a few. This is the third one. The original one was made of wood and didn't last because it collapsed under the massive weight of too many people being on top of it. But whilst I was on the subject of toilets, I might as well say Ouse Bridge is where the first public toilets in York were constructed, back in the 1300s. However, it was only for the gents, and it was just underneath the bridge, probably a bit primitive by modern standards. There was a saying that wise men walk over the bridge and the fools go underneath. But yes, women had to wait a bit longer for public convenience in York, till 1896. So 1300 for the chaps, 1896 for the ladies, which is a long time to cross your legs if you're desperate, you know. So people had to think of other ways to deal with that sort of thing. But yes, sorry ladies, town planning wasn't the best. It's a bit windy though. I hope you can hear me. Hopefully, if you can't hear me, just let me know and I'll speak up a bit more. Anyway, enough nattering about toilets. That's not what you paid for. Well, you haven't paid anything, so you know, I can natter about what I want. Anyway, this is the Ouse Bridge, and back in the day there used to be lots of things on this bridge. There were shops and houses and also a prison, and this is where the final execution I'm going to talk about took place. A woman who I mentioned last time round on the tour, Margaret Clitheroe, or Saint Margaret to give her a proper name, be all due respect, was brought here to the Ouse Bridge, where she was executed by a terrible method known as pressing. She was stripped bare with a stone placed in the small of her back. Despite pleading that she was pregnant, and a wooden door was placed on top of her. And then on top of the wooden door, heavy stones were placed one by one, weighing a large amount. They asked her, of course, if she pled guilty, especially in hiding Catholic priests, but she refused to plead. She thought she'd done nothing wrong. She wasn't going to plead guilty, but arguably she knew there was no point pleading innocent either. So they placed the stones on her one by one, and this ordeal carried on for 15 minutes. Heavy stones pressing down on her chest, crushing the life out of her literally, until eventually, after 15 minutes, she died. A terrible, terrible way to go. So terrible, in fact, that eventually this was one of the last occasions this punishment was used, before eventually being outlawed as so barbaric. Sadly, too late for Margaret. But she still lives on in many ways. Her hand was saved by Catholics and is on display in the Bar Convent just up the road here, the oldest living convent in England. Just up the road here, you can see it on display. It's a bit gnarled and blackened these days, but her hand is still there. And because she's a Catholic saint, properly ordained by the Pope, people do say miraculous things have happened in there. So whether you're a believer or a skeptic, go up there when it's open and go inside. The nuns are still there. They're more than happy to let you see it. And also, a bit noisy, also there is a shrine to her on the shambles of York, where she lived back in the day, where people are allowed to enter. It's possible though that her spirit does live on in York. One gentleman gone inside the shrine to have a look around, and then he saw a woman bent in prayer in a long black dress. He didn't want to disturb her, of course. You know, he just wanted to take a couple of photos and have a look around, and you know, see, he quietly had a look around. And then when he looked back, she'd gone. But there's only one way in and out for visitors, and she hadn't gone past him. So maybe it was Margaret Clitheroe still there. Who can say? But it is a very quiet and very peaceful place to go. So anyway, go in there if you get the chance after all this lockdown shenanigans is over, and see what you can see. But it's just after 7 now, and it's a bit cold and wet. Thank you for persevering with the technical hitches and whatever. And at the end of the video, I'll be putting up a small PayPal link, a virtual tip jar if you will. Don't feel obliged, but if you do want to, if you found anything I've said at all interesting or hopefully entertaining, please feel free to drop a coin or two in the virtual tip jar. I shall say good night. Take care.